Good morning, and can I welcome everyone to the 13th meeting of the Public Petitions Committee in 2020. This meeting is being held virtually. The first item on our agenda today is the consideration of continued petitions. The first continued petition for consideration today is Petition 1683, Support for Families with Multiple Births, lodged by Jennifer Edmonston. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to provide better support for multiple birth families, including both financial and non-financial support. When we last considered this petition in January 2020, the committee agreed to invite the Minister for Children and Young People to give evidence at a future meeting. Since the publication of our meetings papers, we have received a late submission from Twins Trust, which has been circulated to members. And I'm pleased to welcome the Minister today, as well as Scottish Government officials Chris Graham, Head of Welfare Fund and Winter Benefits Policy, and Carolyn Wilson, Team Leader supporting maternal and child wellbeing. And may I invite the Minister to provide a brief opening statement before we move to questions.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning to you and to committee members. I start by reiterating our commitment to ensuring that all children in Scotland get the best start in life. And we strive to provide the best possible care for all families at all stages of their journey, regardless of the circumstances, using our powers to take action to tackle the deep-seated inequalities in our society. The petitioner requested some insights into what other countries have in place to support families of twins and multiples. However, it isn't particularly helpful to make comparisons with one element of another country's health and social care system without considering possible differences in its economic and cultural context. Within the UK, some additional support for parents of multiple birth children in low-income families can be accessed in Northern Ireland. Similar discretionary support is available in Scotland through the Scottish Welfare Fund. The Scottish Government is using its powers for bold ambition in Scotland. We're committed to reducing child poverty by at least 50% by 2030. In even more pressing economic times, we need to focus on providing additional resources to those who have the least, to even out the playing field and to create more equal opportunities for all. Many of the benefits that the petitioner mentions are reserved, and that limits our ability to adjust them. That said, the Scottish Government has introduced a new Scottish child payment for low-income families with children under 6. Payments will be made at the same rate for every eligible child in a household, including those born in multiple births. Our Best Start programme aims to provide the best maternity care wherever women and babies live in Scotland and whatever the circumstances. We recognise that women who are having twins or multiples are more at risk of developing pregnancy-related conditions. These women will receive extra care to ensure that these are identified early and monitored to reduce the risk to mothers and babies. It's recognised that twins and multiple births are also more likely to need neonatal care. This can be very challenging for parents, particularly where babies need different levels of care. The Neonatal Expenses Fund is designed to help parents of premature and sick newborn babies to offset their costs of travelling to and from hospital and subsistence during the first days, weeks and months of their babies' lives. If you have twins or multiple babies in different hospitals, you can claim expenses per day for each baby. I'd also like to add that families who are expecting twins, triplets or even quadruplets are eligible to receive a baby box for each baby. And I'm happy to share that from Friday the 14th of August 2020, we have distributed 145,916 baby boxes to families across Scotland. We've also committed to £50 million of investment in perinatal and infant mental health services, providing more targeted support to pregnant women and new mothers to help improve their mental health and well-being. The Scottish Government also provided funding to enable the Twins Trust to continue to offer free antenatal courses to expectant parents of multiples across Scotland. In setting out all of that, I do empathise with parents of multiple births, and I understand that this will come with additional challenges. It is important to ensure that change is enacted based on appropriate evidence and shared principles, though. So that's why we've invested time and directed resource in particular ways to ensure that all families are supported to give their children the best start in life, so that Scotland's children grow up loved, safe and respected, and that they realise their full potential. I hope that was a helpful opening statement. We are, of course, happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Perhaps if I can start the questioning, and we're grateful for your statement, but in your submission of 8th of October you state the Scottish Government has not carried out research to assess specifically the impact of multiple births. I wonder if the Scottish Government has taken any steps since this submission to further its understanding of the impact on families of multiple births.
No further direct research has been undertaken at this time.
I think that one of the things that the committee felt was that there was a mismatch between the response of the Scottish Government with the concerns that were being flagged up by the petitioner, specifically around the experience of families and the cost of families with twins or multiple births. And to be honest with you, I think your comment there would suggest that that mismatch is still there. The petitioner has stated that having multiples is a privilege. However, it is well documented that relationship breakdown, high-risk pregnancy, financial worries and postnatal depression, to name a few, are more prevalent in families with multiples. I wonder if the Minister agrees with the petitioner that families with multiples are a vulnerable group.
So yes, I do agree. So our maternity services very clearly recognise the high-risk pregnancies that are a fact of multiple births, and that high-risk pregnancies require more support and should be identified early, particularly in the case of twins and multiples. So it begins before birth, our recognition of that vulnerability. There's additional support provided through the Neonatal Expenses Fund, which has come in since this petition began, for travel and subsistence for all families who have babies in the neonatal units, and where babies form a multiple birth and might be cared for in different hospitals. As I said in my opening statement, the fund's available for families to travel to each hospital. And that fund has been worth £4 million over 4 years. So we do recognise the vulnerability. We just see it in a spectrum of vulnerability.
But very specifically around where perhaps twin babies and multiples have problems at birth, but not generally around just the general day-to-day living. So you have highlighted universal provision through the baby box and targeted provision. Why do you not think that multiple births could maybe fall into the targeted provision, except we target specifically families who are vulnerable, disadvantaged, impoverished? But there is an argument, if you've got a universal benefit and a targeted benefit, there is a very strong argument, is there not, given what I've already said, around the need for targeting of multiple births, in more general terms than specifically around what might happen in hospital, but just all of the costs. I mean, one of the figures we're given in a survey by the Twins Trust is that something like 35% of families simply, the mums simply not afford to return to work because of childcare. That's one small example, which is quite a bigger challenge than maybe for a singleton. So would you consider looking at this argument that while there's universal provision and there's targeted provision, there's a very strong argument for targeting resources on multiple births, because not just at birth, but through their early years, there is a big difference between one child and multiple births.
So where having a multiple birth has caused financial hardship, we feel that our universal services targeted at families who are experiencing poverty would pick those up. We don't see families who have twins or triplets as being always vulnerable. We wouldn't describe 100% of them as vulnerable, but those who face financial hardship because of the multiple birth, we feel that our universal services are strong, and there are specific services targeted at people who are experiencing poverty, which will pick up those who are experiencing financial hardship.
But the petition makes it very clear that there are differences. So instead of one pram, one cot, all of a sudden you have to get 2, 3. The chances of the capacity to organise to get back to work is rationally different, which is not about family income. It's about the impact on families and it's not planned, it wasn't expected. Do you not accept that in itself is that category of multiple births is just a very strong argument for provision that meets that?
So yes, and you can see with the Scottish provisions, we certainly do ensure that twins are accounted for. So if you look at the Best Start grant, that does give an extra payment for twins. So the Scottish supports, which are these are universal supports that are available for low-income families, but we do not discriminate against parents of twins in the way that the UK system does. I think that much of the concern about this petition, and I read and watched all of the evidence taking thus far, but much of the concern relates to benefits which are reserved, employment law which is reserved, and which I'm interested to know whether the committee has written to the UK government about perhaps considering some differences in these. The petitioner speaks regularly about the discrimination related to child benefit, and that is a UK government support. So I just wonder whether concerns around that discrimination might be better directed at the UK government.
Okay, that's obviously something we can look at, but you have indicated you've not done any research on this. There's not any consideration of mitigation of the challenges maybe from UK, which has happened with other benefits, that we could maybe have a changed position. And I think the fundamental question here is whether the Scottish Government accepts that there are differences, impacts on families, even if they're not in low income. It can actually, it can affect all families. However, we can move on to Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Minister and Chris and Caroline. Thank you for joining us this morning. The petitioner states in evidence that improved support would help families be better off financially, physically and emotionally, encouraging parents of multiples back into the workplace, and the convener has touched on that in the opening questioning. But in your submission that you provided on Scottish Government measures to support parents into employment, such as the Parental Employment Support Fund, will target priority families. However, families with multiples aren't specifically included. Do you think that they should be?
So I think it's difficult. What we do when we target our support in Scotland and all of our Scottish benefit system, we have finite resources and limited levers, and limited fiscal levers, limited opportunities to raise taxes, and limited opportunities to tweak benefits. What we have chosen to do with the Scottish Government is target those limited resources at the families who are experiencing poverty, and to lift children out of poverty and to close the gap and the impact that early childhood poverty has throughout their lives. And that's where we've chosen to direct our resource. As I said before, we have very limited, abilities in these areas, and the universal, I think, concerns are probably best targeted at the UK government, and probably best to inquire there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom Mason.
Convener, Minister, welcome. In your submission, you said that the Scottish Government has carried out research into the barriers that mothers face when returning to work as part of the Gender Pay Gap Action Plan. Based on this research, what barriers are mothers of multiples facing in comparison to mothers of singles?
So when we looked at that research was published in December 2019, and although the research identified similar barriers returning to work as the petitioner cited, such as the cost of childcare. It didn't look comparatively at mothers of multiples compared to mothers of singles. What it did was took evidence from mothers who had multiple children compared to singles, which is slightly different. That said, some of the findings are similar in nature, but over 80% of the respondents chose not to return to work, citing, "I prefer to work for my child." And of the remaining responses, the common reasons cited were, I can't earn enough to pay for childcare, I can't find enough for suitable childcare, and there are no jobs with the right hours for me. So you know that one of the things the Scottish Government is doing to transform the early learning and childcare landscape is this commitment to 1140 hours, which will be transformative for the children in Scotland. It will be transformative for all parents of under fives. Universal entitlement of 1140 hours for all 3 and 4 year olds and for eligible 2-year-olds, which is at our last calculations around a quarter of 2-year-olds. And the entitlement to early learning and childcare will look kind of like a primary school week. So that will make getting back into work for parents of young children significantly more straightforward. Of course, because of the pandemic, we had to pause the rollout of 1140 hours, but the recent data and intelligence that we're getting from local authorities is giving us great cause for optimism. And when that is rolled out, that will save families £4,500 per year per child. So a significant gain for parents of twins and triplets and multiples.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maurice Corrie.
Convener, thank you, and good morning, Minister, and to your team. Welcome to this Petitions Committee. I must register an interest. I'm a father of multiple births. My wife delivered 2 twin daughters, so I know the strains and stresses of multiple births in considerably detail. Of course, there are challenges, but there are tremendous benefits as well in the glory of having wonderful children around you. So, we learned to cope with it. During the time of that, I was made redundant twice, and things weren't easy. I had to go off abroad to get work to make sure I could stay in my family. So I fully understand the petitioner's views. But I don't think it's right to sort of say, Minister, if I may say, that refer to the UK government for further support. This is a problem that's actually in Scotland. Okay, we're dealing with Scotland, not the UK, and I'd ask you to address it in that terms. Now, the petitioner has repeatedly said that families who find themselves barely outside the category of low income and of multiples are particularly stretched due to the additional cost of having more than one child at a time. Does the Scottish Government recognise this pressure, and what advice can the Minister give to families with multiples who are not eligible for the targeted support grant that is available? And I don't want you to refer to move to the UK government, because we're not talking about UK, we're talking about Scotland, Minister. Thank you.
So certainly, I agree. I do recognise the pressure. I mentioned the UK government simply because when I looked over the evidence sessions, all of the videos, and repeatedly in written submissions, the petitioner refers to child benefit, which is, of course, a reserved benefit, the responsibility of the UK government. This government is absolutely committed to reducing poverty and inequalities. For many years there is, and there continues to be, a strong inequalities gradient right across many social and economic health outcomes. And for some families who have specific needs, our aim is to reduce that disadvantage through the levers that are available to us. We need to provide, we do provide an additional Best Start pregnancy and baby payment for multiple births, but we're targeting the support provided through this and through all of our devolved benefits to low-income families who need it most, because our highest priority is to tackle child poverty. There will always be people who fall just outside that eligibility criteria, and that will be the case regardless of the level at which eligibility is set. So we encourage everyone to apply for the financial support they're entitled to receive. The Money Talk team provides advice on benefits and grants that individuals may be entitled to and on ways to save money and manage money. And using the receipt of the UK government's low income benefits to establish eligibility enables the social security system to confirm eligibility simply and securely. So in Scotland, we have overlaid our security system on what existed already. Different eligibility rules for people in different circumstances could be done, but that would add a great deal of cost and complexity to the system. And one of the challenges with that is that user research suggests that the more complicated eligibility criteria the more likely it is to discourage eligible individuals from applying.
Can I bring Maurice Corrie back in?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, Minister, I hear that. But the question about eligibility and also the funding, and rather than say to the petitioner, go to the UK government for that benefit, is it not right that the Scottish government should address those issues in its own country rather than go south of the border? And therefore, if that's a benefit required, why not take that back on board? Because this is something that clearly needs to be addressed.
So again, I merely state that the child benefit, which is repeatedly raised, is a reserved benefit, and employment law and the challenges with maternity leave and paternity leave are all reserved. So these are issues that need to be raised with the UK government. In Scotland, you're absolutely right. We want Scotland to be the best place in the world for children and young people to grow up. We are trying to create a universal system like our early learning and childcare expansion, which really supports families. The early learning and childcare system in Scotland is universal, unlike the early learning and childcare system in the rest of the UK, which is targeted simply at working families. So in Scotland, families will be entitled to 1140 hours of childcare, whether they are working or not. It may support them to study, to improve family income. It may just provide support to a parent of twins, a mum or a dad who's at home all day and requires that level of practical support to look after their children. That will be available to them. That is not available in the rest of the UK. It is only available to working parents in the rest of the UK. So we are making sure that the systems that we are rolling out and we have control over absolutely do meet the needs of all our parents, including parents of multiple births.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
You talk about targeting provision and say that at the same time you have universal provision. So we've got baby boxes for what you said, 145,000. But on the other hand, multiple births can't have targeted provision because you're targeting those who are most disadvantaged. And I think there's always an argument about the balance of the two. What I don't understand is on what basis, on what research have you decided that families who don't come under low income but are multiple births may not have something that they don't have needs that may be met. You already accepted that you both do universal and targeted. You can't use as an argument against supporting families with multiple births, well, we only target. Why would you not see this as a specific category? And would it be worth your while actually doing some research into because you talk about the petitioner saying a lot about UK benefits, that's fair enough, but she makes an awful lot of other points about what everyday life is like. So I wonder whether at the very least we could ask of you is the Scottish Government will do a bit of research and look at whether you are excluding a group of families who would benefit from a wee bit extra support and not kind of, as you have done, frankly, dismiss them by saying, well, we have this other group that we need to target.
So one of the challenges for any government is to decide where to use their finite resources. And what we are aiming for in Scotland is to have very strong universal systems which support every family. And for our target,
baby box cost?
For our targeted,
can you say to me, tell me how much does a baby box cost per person? Which is a universal provision?
A universal provision. 8 million per year.
8 million pounds. 80 million pounds on baby boxes, which are universal provision. Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
What we've what we aim to do is to have very strong universal services, and then to target specifically, given our finite resources, to target specifically at those families who are experiencing poverty. In terms of research, if I can take you back to that question, one of the challenges of doing research in this area is the very small number of parents involved. Now, with regard to developing policy for parents of twins and multiples, with early learning and childcare, we're at the moment very focused on delivering 1140 hours. We've already begun the work to look at developing a system and a framework for school-age children of childcare. And I'm absolutely, very happy to commit to considering the needs of twins and multiple birth families in that particular development of that policy. I think that would be a very sensible idea. We're just at the moment commissioning work to develop that policy, and I think it would be absolutely, given the petitioners' highlighting of these concerns, it would be very sensible to commit to giving specific consideration to families with multiple births in developing that policy framework.
So we can spend £80 million on a universal provision of baby boxes without much, frankly, analysis of the impact on it. But we can't look at this, you yourself said, a small number. I would actually have thought it as a small number. It's easier to do that qualitative research on the support that they require. But I'm going to ask David Torrance to come in at this point.
Can I just intervene? I think you said 80 million there.
What did you say?
8. 3 times.
8 million. Okay, that's still a lot of money without any targeting. But this very small number of people, as you yourself identify, cannot be seen on the margins of that might actually get a bit of extra support. So can I just ask David Torrance to come in just now? I will let you come back in, Minister, don't worry.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, Minister and your team. In our most recent submission, the petitioner acknowledges all the good work that has been done by the government to support parents and guardians. But multiple births are still at a disadvantage, as they are not accounted for in many of the initiatives on their own merits. Minister, can you tell the committee whether the Scottish Government has any plans to provide support to families with multiples to address this disadvantage, in addition to what support you have already highlighted?
That we're at the moment developing a policy for school-age childcare, and I'm very keen, given the issues that the petitioner highlights, with that policy to look at what the particular needs of families of multiples are. One of the challenges with doing the research in this area, so in terms of quantitative research rather than qualitative research, as the convener mentioned, so quantitative research, when data numbers are low, it is difficult to draw conclusions. It is not, different families face different challenges, so there's no universal experience of a family with twins or triplets. So it's very difficult to draw conclusions about what is required to support them and whether, so absolutely, I am keen, while we are developing policy, to consider what might need to be taken into account. And as I say, we are demonstrating that we are listening and keen to ensure that our policy meets the needs of families with multiples. And I cite our development of the school-age childcare framework as an example of precisely that.
Thank
you. Thank you. The Minister talks about there being small numbers. Do you have any idea what the numbers are?
So there's about 1.5% of births in a year.
So that would be
a small number.
What number would that be?
I'm sorry, I don't have that right at my fingertips. I can find it.
Okay.
If you
just
like.
Can you explain to me? Can you explain to me why, if it's small numbers, you can't assess the specific impact on families of multiple births? It's not a massive research programme. You actually cite as an explanation why it's difficult. It's a small number. Maybe it's just me, but I would have thought if there was a small number, that would make that research pretty straightforward.
So it becomes, I mean, perhaps it's just an issue with research. In terms of quantitative research, small numbers give you poor answers.
But we're not asking for, we want to understand the experience of families with multiple births. Why don't we talk to them?
We certainly do talk to them, and we give a grant.
I mean, as a group, as an analysis, as an understanding of what the impact is, it must be straightforward to have the conversation, the assessment, the kind of, proper research into their experience. I mean, are we seriously saying that because there's only small numbers and we can't do that research? That doesn't bode very well for other minority groups.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it would leave you with simply qualitative research, and twins families and multiple birth families are not a homogenous group. However, we do work very closely with the Twins Trust. We fund them to provide antenatal teaching to these families and a number of other supports, and we could certainly work with them to develop some research to understand the impacts that of policy choices and the policy choices which are available to us in Scotland to see if we can meet the needs of multiple birth families better.
I don't think anybody's suggesting that they're a homogenous group, but I think there is a specific experience of multiples and twins that would be worth capturing, and it's what the petitioner is highlighting. Can I just ask a last couple of points, and then I'll check if any other members want to come in. First of all, the petitioner, you did flag up support for the Twins Trust. The petitioner said that there had been a commitment of funding in February 2019 to support and educate families in preparation for multiple births. Has that funding been released?
Yes.
That's excellent. That's good progress there. The other thing I wanted to ask you, in terms of meeting the specific needs of this small group of people who don't really fall into some of the categories we might identify, have you looked at the issue of free nursery care? We know that we're looking at, there is already a category for vulnerable children from age 2 to access childcare. Is that something that you would consider looking at for families of twins and multiple births?
So certainly what we have available is a system where there is universal provision for all 3 and 4-year-olds. And there is, as you say, a category of vulnerable children, various qualifications which entitle children aged 2 to that same provision. That applies to about a quarter of children in Scotland. Of course, at the moment we are facing an economic crisis, and that proportion of children who are eligible to that may increase. In terms of offers of support to twins, I'm not considering particularly targeting them, and I don't think it is possible at the moment during this period of expansion where all of our focus is on delivering 1140 hours to add that category. However, I am confident that there are flexibilities there already in law to enable local authorities to meet the needs of children and families in their communities. So we heard the lady from the Twins Trust in the very first session when giving evidence about how Clackmannanshire Council had supported a mum with twins and ensured that she was able to access early learning and childcare. That particular flexibility is available to all local authorities, and I would expect them to use it. So as well as the provision of funded early learning and childcare, local authorities have in fact duties under Section 27 of the Children in Scotland Act 1995 to provide daycare for children in need within their area. And that may well have been what happened with that mum in Clackmannanshire. In addition to the duties they have to children who are in need in their area, they also have discretionary powers to provide daycare to children who might not be assessed as in need. And local authorities can fulfil their 1995 Act duty with any type of care that they deem appropriate. So again, I was interested that you had considered writing to COSLA on that point. I think it would be very interesting to hear their view. I couldn't see, again, a response from COSLA in the evidence paper it's, online for the committee, but often, almost daily, people petition me to dictate from the centre what local authorities should do with these discretions. And usually my response is to leave the discretion up to local authorities who really, I genuinely believe, are best placed to recognise and respond to the needs in their local communities. If COSLA would like to enter that discussion, I'm more than happy to. So.
Well, it does seem very odd to me that there are some things that you think are entirely a matter for discretion for local authorities, and other things, to use your own term, you're completely focused on the childcare hours, and there are impositions in local government in other areas. I'm not clear still why you've set your face against the specific need that has been identified by this group. You've already said it's a small group of people. You've already accepted that there are issues here. You're praising a local authority where they are providing extra support, but you still don't think there's a job for you as a government minister to identify this group of people, these families, as needing particular support.
I think because I am confident that our universal services will support them sufficiently, and where that...
They're telling you it won't, with respect, Minister. The whole point of the petition is that they're saying it doesn't.
Where that support is not sufficient, there will be flexibilities available locally, as the evidence you have taken demonstrates. There will be flexibilities available locally to support. Okay,
so you're at the mercy. You're saying for families like the petitioner, well, let's just hope you've got a local authority that's supportive, because it's not for you to identify this group as having particular need. Yeah? It's a matter for, well, if in your local authority they provide this, good, but you don't think it's a matter of policy or direction or otherwise at a Scottish level?
So, as I've said, at the moment we are working very hard to deliver 1140 hours with the eligibilities that are already set.
But it's possible to do more than one thing at a time, is it not, Minister? You wouldn't say to families with a specific child with disabled needs, a special child with additional support needs, well, we're very focused on this 1100 hours, so we can't meet your need currently, even when these families are perhaps not economically under a challenge. But for this group of people, you have decided that you're not going to even research what their needs are to see if there's a bit of flexibility in the system, support them one way they don't have to rely entirely on local government, being in the right place at the right time.
So my highest priority at the moment is to deliver 1140 hours. Our judgments about who should be targeted are always based on need, and our priority as a government, long stated, is to target and support low-income families, and we leave flexibilities to target support on others who do not have those same identified needs.
But you're not identifying the needs. You're not even prepared to do the research to see if there are needs that are tipping people over, are on the margins of. I mean, your basic position seems to be there isn't need here. Is that fair? And you're not going to ask by doing some research whether there's need.
So I'm more than happy. I stated on the record that we can discuss with Tamba whether research is whether it is possible to do research which will demonstrate needs, and I'm more than comfortable to do that. I am more than happy to consider that in future, and I stated that already. At the moment,
thank you. Maurice Corrie, you want to come back in?
Lavinia, thank you very much. If I may come back on the back of your question to the Minister. Minister, you play a lot of emphasis on this question about the local authorities. Now, having been a councillor in Argyll and Bute, I'm fully aware, and I did a lot of work with families and the Families Board. What is your guidance then, as a government, to local authorities on this particular subject, and also what funding provisions will you make available? Because quite clearly you've got to put your money where your mouth is.
as you know,
Minister?
in terms of early learning and childcare, we came to an agreement a number of years ago on a multi-year funding for 1140 hours. And that contained within it an estimate of eligible 2-year-olds, which is where the flexibilities lie, or which was sufficient to cover both those who would have a statutory eligibility and discretion, or those who would be considered desirable for the local authorities to support. I'm confident that there is sufficient money in the system to cover that, and we do give guidance. So there is guidance, and it is defined in law who is, there are duties for local authorities to support children who are in need, and there is, I am confident, sufficient to support discretionary payment support on top of that. My sense is that we have developed very, very strong universal services in Scotland, and that those universal services will support all parents in Scotland. And those who are in poverty will be able to receive targeted support, and that there is a space in the middle for discretionary support, which I am confident will pick up the needs. If needed, if I am wrong in that, we will certainly work closely with the Twins Trust to identify that need in the middle of that, and to see what we can do in Scotland to support that. As I said, though, repeatedly the petitioner has raised concerns about the UK welfare system, which, as you know, is something which taxes me greatly as somebody who has responsibility for child poverty, because it is the changes in the welfare system which has increased the level of child poverty in this country. So where there are concerns around child benefit, I would plead that the committee considers contacting the UK government to see if we can fix that at source, rather than pressuring the Scottish Government to mitigate something which the committee appears to believe and agree with the petitioner is profoundly unfair.
Nobody's suggesting it's one or the other. I think we are in the interest of supporting the petitioner, and frankly your sense of something, with all due respect, is not enough in terms of understanding. I'm going to call in Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Minister, it's very heartening to hear you say that there will be support if it's needed for those with multiple births through the local authority. Can I just ask, for those who are watching that may be looking to access that support, who they would go to in the first instance if they are struggling with childcare issues?
So usually the health visitor, as you know, as I've said, we've strengthened the universal services, so the health visitor pathway has been strengthened. Health visitors will see new parents regularly in the first year and the first couple of years of life, and they will be carrying out assessments, formal assessments, as well as informal judgments about who requires support. And health visitors would usually be the first point of contact for these mums who require support to access it through the local authority.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've reached the end of our questioning there. I'm just going to ask very briefly committee members if they have a particular view on how we take this forward. I think this is something perhaps that as a committee we want to have to reflect on what we've heard today before we make any further decisions, but perhaps people can indicate if they're not content with that, if they think there's something else that we should be doing as well. Okay, in that case, if that's agreed, we will reflect on the evidence at a future meeting, and also that will afford an opportunity for interested people to respond to what they've heard from the Minister, and I think we would be keen, as she has flagged up, perhaps to have a conversation with COSLA about their views on this. But can I genuinely thank the Minister for her time this morning? I think that has been very productive. I think there was a sense that there was in the exchange of correspondence, really a kind of not getting a chance to come to the actual root of the issue. And I'd like to thank the Minister and officials for their attendance today. I'm going to suspend the meeting now and will resume at 10:20. But thanks again, Minister, and your officials. Thank you, and if I can call the meeting back to order, and we now move to the next continued petition for consideration today, which is petition 1577, Adult Cerebral Palsy Services, lodged by Rachel Wallace. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to develop and provide funding for a clinical pathway and services for adults with cerebral palsy. Following our last consideration of this petition, we have received a submission from the Minister for Public Health, Sport and Wellbeing. The petitioner was invited to respond to this submission, but no response has been received. The Minister in a submission advised the committee that, quote, officials have contacted the petitioner and made arrangements to meet her in April. They will discuss how the framework will help adults with cerebral palsy and opportunities for Ms Wallace to be involved in the framework implementation. And that certainly does feel as if there has been progress made, but I'm going to call in members in turn who may have a view on what we should do next with this position. And can I call Gail Ross first?
Yes, convener, thank you. Very positive from what we have read. I would say that the arrangements were made to meet in April, and obviously we were in lockdown during April, so I'm not really very sure where we are with the actual meeting, but the very fact that a meeting had been arranged between the government and the petitioner, I think, is a massive step forward. So on that basis, I would say that we have taken this as far as we can, and I would move to close under Rule 15.7 and just say thank you and congratulations to the petitioner for what we see as a success so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I agree fully with what Gail Ross has just said. And I think it's great to see the success of this petition, and clearly the Scottish Government has sat up and listened, and obviously involving her in her knowledge and practical experience of this particular issue. So I would wish to see this petition close. I believe it's run its course, and certainly the petitioner, if there's any issue in not making progress, of course she has the right to come back in a year's time. So I would recommend we close the petition under Rule 15.7 of the standing orders.
Thank you. David Torrance.
Thank you, convener. I'm happy to close the petition and I've nothing else to add to it.
Thank you. Tom Mason.
Thank you, convener. Certainly we seem to have good progress here, and I'm happy to close it under 15.7.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. I think there is an agreement there has been progress. I think that this has been taken a bit of time, and the persistence of the petitioner has certainly helped in that regard. I think we always recognise there was a significant issue here. But I think if it is the case that the petitioner is going to be engaged with the Scottish Government, that is progress, and I think we should close the petition. But I would very much alive to the point that Maurice Corrie makes, which is if progress breaks down, the petitioner can return in a year's time with that. It may be that we would want, I think the point that Gail Ross makes about the impact of COVID on meetings full stop may have meant that has not yet happened yet. So perhaps in closing the petition, we could simply write to the Scottish Government recognising that they have made this commitment and that we welcome that, and just to remind them that we would expect that to happen. So I think we're agreeing, unless I see otherwise, to close the petition under Rule 15.7. The Scottish Government has committed to meeting with the petitioner to discuss how the neurological care and support framework will help adults with cerebral palsy, and how the petitioner can be involved in the framework's implementation, and that we would write to the Scottish Government just to flag up again that commitment. And in closing the petition, we'd want to acknowledge the work of the petitioner and all of those who engaged with this argument and debate, and remind the petitioner, of course, it's possible to return in a year's time, and thank her again for her engagement with the Public Petitions Committee. The next continued petition for consideration today is petition 1671, sale and use of glue traps, lodged by Lisa Harvey and Andrea Goddard on behalf of Let's Get Mad for Wildlife. The petition is calling on the Scottish Government to ban the sale and use of glue traps and boards in Scotland. Since the petition was last considered in January 2020, we have received a written submission from the Scottish Government and 2 written submissions each from the Pest Management Alliance and the petitioners. These submissions are summarised in our CLATS note. And I think that clearly there has been, again, some progress in this petition and recognition that there is an issue here about animal welfare, and the professionals have made their argument about pest control, and I think it is clear that people have engaged seriously with the concerns that have been flagged up. But I'm going to ask colleagues for their comments and observations on this petition, and I'll call Maurice Corrie first.
Thank you for that. Yes, as I say, it's obviously disturbing some of the detail in it, and obviously protecting our wildlife in this country. I'm of the mind that we should write to the Scottish Government for clarification on the action it's undertaken with the Animal Welfare Commission, just to give us peace of mind regarding a possible code of practice to govern the use of glue traps in Scotland, because I believe that's missing before we would take it any further. So I believe that's the course of action at the moment I would like to see the committee take. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. David Torrance? I
would agree with Maurice there, Convener. I actually think the petition should stay open, because even in the Scottish Government has said it would need legislation to bring the ban forward. Parliamentary time is very short just now, and I do not think there will be any new bills introduced, so I still would like to see this petition stay open.
Okay, I'm going to go to Gail Ross just now, and then if Tom Mason's available, I'll go back to him, but I think he's having some technical problems, but I'll call Gail first.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, this is obviously another animal welfare kind of very emotive subject that we're having to deal with here. I agree with the Animal Welfare Commission. I think that this is something that they should be looking into, and I think that we need to get some points over to the Scottish Government, from what we've been reading. And I want to thank everyone that sent evidence in. I think it's been really quite useful. But I do think that if we're going to have an Animal Welfare Commission, then we need to make sure that its remit is as wide as possible. And I would like to see glue traps included in this. I think David Torrance is absolutely right. There's absolutely no possibility now of any bills coming before us before we finish up for this term. So anything that would go forward would be in the next Parliament. I am flexible whether we keep it open or whether we close it, with a recommendation to write to the Scottish Government to include this as part of the Animal Welfare Commission's remit. So I would go with the majority of what everyone else thinks, but I'm happy actually to close it with a recommendation to Scottish Government on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gail. From my own view, I think this was a petition that did have an impact on people, maybe something that some folk didn't know about. I hadn't known anything about it. I think the stage we've got to is that it's the petitioners and the professionals are having an argument about is there a specific need and whether the guidance is strong enough. And I'm not convinced that in what remains of the parliamentary term, the Public Petitions Committee can do much more, even although we recognise that tension has to be resolved in some way, and that will be resolved through legislation, which I think, as David says quite rightly, will not come to the new session of the Parliament. There is therefore an opportunity, and I'm sure it will happen, that there will be conversations between the campaigners on animal welfare and individual parties and what's going to be their manifestos around this question, because that will resolve whether the legislation will be taken forward or not. So I think that's an area of opportunity for the petitioners. And one view is I think that we would close it, but I do think we should write to the Scottish Government saying that we do think that this is something that the Animal Welfare Commission should look at, that there should be a possible code of practice to govern the use of blue traps in Scotland, and we're therefore flagging up to the Scottish Government. We think this should be part of their remit. I wonder, I don't know if Tom Mason is back online. I don't think he is yet. I wonder if the other members who are on the committee have a view on that suggestion, that we do close it, but we do make this recommendation, which is, I think, reasonably solid around the question of what the role of the Animal Welfare Commission might be in this regard. Can I call in Gail?
Yes, Convener, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Could I just add, could we maybe copy that letter to the cross-party group on animal welfare as well? So that would ensure that they would have an ongoing sight of what was happening and they could perhaps follow that up too. Thank you.
I think that would be a very practical suggestion. I suspect people would agree with. I'm going to call Tom Mason if he's in, but if he's back on, if not, I think we will have to make a decision and move on. Tom Mason?
Yes, Convener, I think I'm here. Can you hear me? Well,
interesting objects on your desk certainly are.
Yes, I've got at the moment I have the wrong camera on, but I'll speak.
If you make the contribution, Tom, and then we can sort that out for the next one. But if you can
I would happy with the recommendation that as you described. I'm happy to close it, but we do need to make sure that the government does progress this in a satisfactory manner.
Okay, thank you very much for that then. I think that colleagues are agreed to close the petition under Rule 15.7, but that we would write to the Scottish Government making a recommendation in relation to the role of the Animal Welfare Commission, and we would flag up to the cross-party group that this is an issue that's been considered in some detail by the committee. And as to repeat my earlier comments, there is nothing like an election for concentrating the minds of parties on individual issues that they may want to put into their manifesto. So we are agreeing to close the petition, but we'd want to again thank the petitioners very much for their engagement with the committee. And I'm also conscious that actually the other stakeholders in this have been very rigorous in the submissions that they've also been making. I think that's helped the deliberations of the committee. I'm just noting that Maurice Corrie wanted to come in very briefly. Maurice?
Thank you, Convener. No, I just wanted to say I absolutely agree with what we've decided. So just to clarify that, but I think it's important that we do make the cross-party group aware as well. And I thought it was a very good idea, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're agreeing to close that petition. And to repeat myself, we want to thank again the petitioner or the petitioners for the role they have played in relation to that petition. If we can now move on to the next continued petition for consideration today, which is petition 1682, access to specialist support for hidradenitis suppurativa sufferers in Scotland, lodged by James Jimison. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to establish a specialist clinic for hidradenitis suppurativa sufferers in Scotland. Since the petition was last considered in December 2019, the committee has received a written submission from the Scottish Government. In this submission, the Scottish Government states that all territorial boards in Scotland provide services for this condition, delivered by a range of clinicians, including dermatologists, with input from regional plastic surgery services. The submission also highlights that any clinician can request a specialist service. However, no clinician to date has sought national designation of a service for HS. I'll be interested in members' views on this petition. I had the privilege of meeting with the petitioner along with Rona Mackay, who was at that time a member of the committee, and he made a very compelling case for being in a circumstance where he felt that his very specific condition wasn't being recognised, and that he felt that he was speaking for other people in this regard. So I think in terms of our consideration, we need to think about to what extent we can add anything more. I think we've had the opportunity to highlight the condition. It may be that services are different in different parts of the country, which is obviously a concern, or that there's simply a lack of understanding about this very particular and debilitating condition. I'm going to call members and I'd be interested in their views. First of all, David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. Very sympathetic to this petition, but the Government's highlighted that the territorial boards should be providing these services and should be providing the specialists to deal with HS. So I don't think we could take this petition any further, and I'm quite happy to close it under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders.
Okay, thank you. Tom Mason?
I'm happy to have this closed at this junction. I have a few problems here that I'm trying to resolve. Do you see me? Do you see me?
I'm not seeing you, but we're hearing you, so that's the most important thing at this stage.
Okay. Right, I'm happy to close.
Okay, thank you. Gail Ross?
Yeah, this is a really difficult one. I mean, I hear what you say about meeting the gentleman. I didn't meet him myself, but from what you've said, you know, it's a really personal issue, and I do think that the evidence that we have from the Scottish Government possibly leads me to think that it's an issue with accessing the appropriate care from his local health board. I think David Torrance is correct. As a committee, I don't think that we are able to take it any further. But what I would suggest is to maybe seek more involvement from his local MSP to see if maybe they can push the local health board to maybe do some more individualised services for the petitioner. So, you know, for us to close it, not to say that we don't want to do any more. It's just that, you know, I think that we have taken it as far as we can, and the petitioner has my every sympathy, and just to thank them for bringing this to us. But I do really feel now that it's probably an individual MSP case to take forward. Thank you. So I would close as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Maurice Corrie?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I follow on with that and would agree to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think that the point that Gail Ross makes about perhaps continuing to pursue his individual support needs with his local MSP is perhaps the best way forward. I do have a concern that the Scottish Government is basically saying, well, if clinicians want to do this, they need to raise it, or the petitioner needs to raise it. There must be something in the system, I would have thought, that would trigger this. But of course, we've dealt with this before, where you're dealing with conditions which are, well, this one seems to fall between two stools. It's not so rare that it flags itself, and it's not so common that there are a general provision. But I think that we need to be honest with the petitioner that at this stage, there's really, we have flagged up, we've highlighted his concerns, and these are in the system, and we would hope that would have an effect, but that it may be, in terms of indirect individual experience, this is something that his elected member could pursue with him on his behalf with the health board and other relevant officials. With that, I think there is a consensus, unless I see disagreement, that we're going to close the petition under Rule 15.7, as for the reasons that have been highlighted. And again, I'd want to thank the petitioner for taking the time to petition the committee and to meet with myself and my colleague and to engage with the committee in the way that he has done. And of course, if there is no progress in a year's time and he feels that people with the condition he suffers are still in the same position, he can of course return to the committee. And again, we just thank him for his engagement. If we can now move on to the next continued petition for consideration today, which is petition 1725, Suicide Awareness and Support for Young People, lodged by Anne-Marie Kokoza on behalf of families and friends affected by murder and suicide. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to make suicide awareness education, information and training mandatory for all high school pupils, teachers, carers and parents, and to provide specific ring-fence funding for this training. As our paper for this petition outlines, the committee agreed to meet with FAMS to help inform the committee's inquiry into mental health support for young people in Scotland. Maurice Corrie, MSP, and I had the great privilege of meeting with the petitioner, staff and people who have used the services provided by the charity. in February 2020. I think I can speak for us both when I say that it was clear that the charity serves as an important source of support for people affected by suicide in the local community in which they operate. Our paper outlines some of the key messages we heard during the meeting relevant to our inquiry work and how these messages help to inform our subsequent report published in July. And also we have to take a view on this specific petition. I am conscious of the fact that the petition did make a positive contribution to our own report on mental health and young people, and I certainly, it was clear on the day that both Maurice and I got a great deal out of the meeting. I can't believe that it's only in February this year. It feels like a very long time ago, because of course in February we couldn't possibly have imagined what was ahead of us, and we now have to think what we want to do next with this petition. I think there is no doubt has already informed a lot of our work and the work of our report, which will be about now, thinking about how we disseminate that and the response of the Scottish Government. These will be things that the committee will consider further. But if I can call Tom Mason first.
Yes, I mean, we certainly have covered the distance on this one in terms of cover, and the report does make a major contribution to what's trying to happen here. If we're going to highlight any concerns that have been raised, I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that, except via the report, and I hope that the report does have the effect we're hoping it should. I think at this stage, and the petitioner has helped us out considerably, I think at this stage it would be sensible to close it as a petition and see how the various environment continues in the future in terms of advice and really seeing if we manage to maintain and improve or try to reduce the suicide rates and so on. So I think the measure of the whole success will be in the results forward. So we need some time to see what actually happens. So closing at this point and wait to see what happens. And if we need to raise the petition again, it can be done in some time in the future.
Thank you very much, Tom. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I mean, we certainly can't understate how important this petition has been and will continue to be. I think more important than ever now, given where we find ourselves in the midst of this pandemic. And the Minister, in her response to our inquiry, stated exactly the same thing. She also states that in response to the pandemic, there certainly has been either a bringing forward of provision or an increase in funding for provision for different initiatives, and she went on to list them. I won't list them just now because we have time constraints, but certainly I do also look back to the session that we did with teachers in the EICC last year, and the teachers that we met were very sympathetic towards mental health first aid training and suicide awareness training. But a lot of them did not want it to be mandatory, and I think we need to be mindful of the views of the profession, and therefore the recommendations that we had then in our own report about initial teacher training and continuous professional development. I do think that Tom Mason is correct in that as a petitions committee, we need to be mindful of where we are and where we can go with this. I think that the report is a very strong report. It has a lot of recommendations to Scottish Government. The Minister's response detailed a lot of work, and I do think that we need to see that bedded in. But I do still think that provision in different health boards is probably different, and it's up to us as elected members to pursue that individually. I'm certainly doing that in my area at the moment. So I would move to close under Rule 15.7. Thank the petitioner profusely for their involvement and for bringing this subject to us. It's not an easy subject. It certainly hasn't been an easy subject for us to deal with. But they should feel extremely proud of themselves, because they certainly have initiated a lot of change within government, and obviously they are free to bring this back in a year's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Convener. I actually endorse everything there that Gail Ross has said and Tom Mason. I must say, having joined yourself on the visits to the various establishments and teams that we met, I was deeply moved by it, so much so that actually I'm working to establish a FAM team in Alexandria and Vale Leven as we speak, alongside some other work we're doing in mental health. It's a very powerful message that was there. And I thought that the teachers, the school staff involved, whether it be, including janitors and dinner ladies, etc. as well, all need to be aware and mindful of suicide issues. And therefore, I think it's very important that the mental health first aid training is included in initial teacher education. So I would back all that. And I think, having seen it not just from the teachers when we visited them at the International Conference Centre in Edinburgh, and down to the schools and the borders and to Motherwell and indeed to Govan, we were really deeply moved by that and what the teachers were crying out for help and support on that. So I think teachers and then of course the families too, which we met, and my goodness, it met us face on in Motherwell, which Convener, we visited. So I think the best way forward is to close the petition at the moment, because we had an excellent report produced. I think there's a lot of work there that the government needs to work on. But I'm also deeply concerned that the cascade effect, Convener, goes down properly to the local authorities and the families, teams that work in local authorities, and indeed the education teams particularly. So I think whatever we can do to strengthen that situation, I would be tremendously supportive of. And I think it's indicative of the work that the government needs to do to ensure that teachers and school staff at every level are given the opportunity for the training concerned that's needed for this sort of work. But thank you for that, and I thank all those who asked us to go visit them and for all the information we received. And I've seen one or two positive situations happening even in my own area since then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. Can I just add that I agree with everything that committee members have said. Can we thank the petitioner once again for highlighting issues around mental health, how it's contributed to the work of the committee, and also how it's highlighted issues to the government, and the government's had to respond. So I thank the petitioner for this, and that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you, David. Yes, I think we are agreeing to close the petition, and that's not to say that we're closing the issue. The issue is clearly ongoing. I think Gail's right to highlight in the current circumstances we can only look forward and dread a little actually what the consequences of lockdown may have been for some young people in their mental health, and indeed for the adult population as well. And that, as I've said already, our report and the implications from it will be ongoing. We're also conscious that this petitioner and the group she represents will be dealing with that directly within our communities, and I think we need to, that's one of the issues we should be reflecting on, is the extent to which that kind of support is available in other places. And I think Maurice's point about trying to ensure that it's available at a local level is really important. I have to say I was unconvinced by the argument of the Scottish Government that they're unable to mandate the content of teacher training. I think you may not make something compulsory, but you can certainly flag up to the colleges and to universities the need for teachers to be trained in this regard, indeed for the whole staff in a school. And I don't think it's really sufficient to simply say, well, we can't mandate it, so they can't, and close that off. And indeed, it may be that local authorities prioritise the use of the resources in line with local priorities, but I still think we can flag up to them that these really matter. But I think the consensus of the committee is that we do close the petition, and as I said, the issues that they flag up will be ongoing. The importance of young people understanding how to look after themselves and the role of the school community and the community more generally in supporting young people in this regard is absolutely underlined by the work that's been done by these groups. And we want to thank the petitioner for their engagement, thank them very much for their warm welcome when we visited. We wish them well with all the work they continue to do to support people in the local community. And again, as we've said, there's an opportunity in a year's time to bring this issue back if they felt that that was necessary. And thanks again. If we can now move on to the next continued petition for consideration today, which is petition 1731, permit audio recording of local government public meetings, lodged by Tom Taylor. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to amend the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 to permit audio recording of all public council meetings by members of the public. Since our last consideration, we have received submissions from the Minister for Local Government, Housing and Planning and the petitioner. The Minister advises that they do not believe there is any significant risk following experience in England and Wales, and there is not a justifiable need for additional safeguards. They also advise they would be amenable to direct officials to take this amendment forward, which I think is a very positive response. I'm rather struck by the gap between what a device would look like recording events in 1973 and now. And as somebody who had an old-fashioned tape recorder, I think people might be appalled if we started whipping them out at public meetings, but the world has moved on so much, the capacity to record discreetly is so significant, and we all have these at our hand that we are definitely in another world. So it does feel to me that the Government Minister has indicated there's no reason why this shouldn't happen. It's quite supportive. But I will call members. Jill Ross first.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, we no longer need to press record and play at the same time. I totally agree. I mean, when we first considered this, there was talk about who was able to record, and certain councils webcast certain meetings live, and you can go back and you can check, and certain councils don't. And I think there is a disparity between that. Interested to hear the Minister's response, and I think that there was initially a worry about sensitive and confidential information, but local authorities hold those meetings behind closed doors anyway if there's going to be something that is going to pertain to maybe staff contracts or other sensitive information. So I'm absolutely delighted with the response. I'm happy to close the petition under 15.7 of standing orders to congratulate the petitioner on their success. I don't think that there's any need for us to get another reply from the government, but I do think that it might be pertinent for us just to send a quick note or a letter just to make sure that the government are taking the steps that they've identified in the petition. But happy to close and to thank the petitioner once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. Yes, I agree with what Gail's saying there, but also, having been a councillor, you have the right to go into private session, and therefore, obviously, that facility is available to councils anyway, so I have no problem with that. But as the Minister says, and the time's moved on and technology's moved forward, and I agree that I see no reason why we shouldn't close this petition now on that basis.
Thank you. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I'm quite happy to close the petition and have nothing else to add to it.
Thank you. Tom Mason.
Thank you, Convener. No, I'm happy to close. We certainly have made some progress here, and I think a note to the government to make sure they do what they say they're going to do would be good. But however, closing I think is the right thing to do here.
Okay, in that case, there's clearly general agreement that we should close this petition. We recognise there has been progress. We welcome the indication from the Scottish Government that they want to do to take this forward. So I think we would agree to close the petition. and we would write to the Scottish Government to say that it's on that basis of their support for it that we're agreeing to close. And again, as we say to the petitioner, to thank them very much for the engagement with the committee, and that if they feel the progress hasn't been made in a year's time, there's an opportunity for them to return. But I think this has been a very positive response for the petitioner, and I'm sure they must, I hope they will recognise that they have secured some progress in this regard, and thank them for their involvement with the petition. If we can now move on to the final continued petition for consideration today, which is petition 1770, Improving Water Safety, lodged by Margaret Spears. This petition calls on the Scottish Government to work with all relevant bodies across Scotland to improve water safety by ensuring that all waterways have life-saving equipment, such as life belts and buoyancy throw bags, with ropes to allow multiple attempts at rescue, and tampering with water safety equipment is made a criminal choice of endangering public safety. The petition was last considered in January 2020. Since that meeting, the committee has received written submissions from the Scottish Government, Water Safety Scotland and the petitioner. The committee has also met with the petitioner to gather more information on the petition. In its written submission, the Scottish Government explains that both inland and coastal waters are affected by a combination of Scots common law and by statutory requirements, the majority of which come under the remit of local authorities. Although the submission states that it is for local authorities to agree and adopt their own water safety policies, it also highlights that the Minister for Community Safety wrote to all community safety partnerships to encourage them to engage with Water Safety Scotland to support the implementation of the National Drowning Prevention Strategy. I would want to, in my own comments, first of all, to thank Margaret and Duncan Spears for meeting with me. I had the privilege of meeting with them. Their work on this is immense, driven by the tragic loss of their own son, Christopher, but they have done immense work. And actually, if you go along the side of the River Clyde, I had opportunity during lockdown to walk along, you'll see the evidence of the distinctly coded ropes there as a mark of their achievement so far, although it's also clear that there are some people who still seem to think that it's somehow appropriate to throw water safety supports, like ropes and so on, to vandalise them. And I can't think of anything more awful and meaningless and pointless than to do that, to prevent somebody being saved if they fall into water by that kind of vandalism and damage. I think as a committee we've been very struck by not just what has driven this petition, but the very practical measures that have been delivered, and there's clear evidence of that. I should also say that Ivan McKee, MSP, who's a local MSP, did speak to me directly, and I know that he's in direct contact with the family and is supportive of their petition. And I wonder if, in terms of thinking what we do now, and whether there's, my own view is that I think we have got to the point where we have obviously had the opportunity to highlight some of the important issues that have been flagged up in the petition. We need to think about whether there's any further we can do. I think maybe at this point, my view would be that we'd want to close the petition, but I will ask the committee for their views, and we'll start with Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Convener. If I may just register an interest, I'm Vice Convener of the Cross-Party Group for Accident Prevention, and I've actually had quite a lot to do with water safety, and we're currently looking at the issues that the 32 local authorities, those who do not have water safety policies in relation to coastal and inland waters, is actually incredibly stark. If I said to you there's only about 3 that have policies in place fully, and another 2 are sort of in the making. The rest don't. There is a fairly there's really a lack of urgency to look at this when we raise it with them, and ROSPA and the Water Safety Council also encourage them to do this. So we're carrying out a research at the moment, and I've written to COSLA in my vice convener capacity, looking at this project to see how we can actually encourage local authorities to do an awful lot more to put the water safety policies in place. Now, when I challenged the ministers about 2 years ago about this, responsible for communities and safety, it was quite clear that the retort was, it is not a statutory requirement. So it's based a lot on individual officers and local authorities to come up with what their view is. the issue here is based on statistical risk assessment. And if the stats don't stack up, then therefore is not the priority is not given to that particular aspect of local authority work. So the funding for that may go somewhere else. So it's an education process. So I'm reluctant to close it in the sense that I think we should write. Well, I've written to COSLA in another vein, in another office I'm dealing with, but I do think we should probably see some more out of COSLA ourselves as a petitions committee, and also Police Scotland, because there clearly is something here that we need to rectify, and I would not want this work that the parents of the deceased feel that hasn't gone unnoticed, and I know it hasn't. I know you've done a lot of work, Convener, with them, and I'm very grateful to that. So yes, I'm passionate about this one. I think it's something we should continue on, and there is a lot of work going on at the moment. I only convened a meeting 3 days ago over the head of water safety with local authorities. So I'm minded to us to write to COSLA and Police Scotland to get a definitive.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you provide some quite scary stats there around how many people have policies. David Torrance?
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for Morris for the information there, because I would have thought more local authorities would have had policies in place for water safety. Can I say I would like to keep the petition open and like Morris write to COSLA and Police Scotland for reviews.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom Mason?
Thank you, Convener. I agree. I think we should keep this open. It's a very important issue, and it's if we can get this right, the opportunity to save lives is quite extensive, and it could be equipment and the like being in good condition can be the reason why lives are saved. So I think keeping it open, writing to COSLA and the Police Scotland to get some more information and push the process through to the local level to make sure it becomes comprehensive cover throughout Scotland would be a good idea. So keep it open, write to COSLA and Police Scotland.
Okay, thank you. Gail Ross?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, very helpful information there from Morris, so thanks for that. I agree that this petition is not ready to be closed yet. There are a number of issues that we still need to pursue, and certainly writing to COSLA and Police Scotland, I would say, is a very good idea, so I would agree with that course of action. Thank you.
Okay, I think there is a clear view here that we haven't quite finished with it. That I think the point that Morris makes about not all local authorities having a policy is a matter of concern, and I hear the strength of feeling across the committee on it, but that so that we would agree to write to COSLA and to Police Scotland seeking their views on the action called for in the petition. So it's both about policy around water safety, it's also about enforcement, the extent to which we should actually be looking at really addressing the behaviour that's causing a lot of this. So it's not just that the appliances are not, maybe the appropriate safety measures are not there, but even if they are there, they're vandalised. I think that is at the heart of it. And then there's also a question about educating people who would even think to do such a thing. So I think that clearly the consensus of the committee is that we write to COSLA and Police Scotland seeking their views on the action called for on the petition. And if that's agreed, we can now move on to agenda item 2, which is consideration of new petitions. The first new petition for consideration today is petition 1789, Learning Difficulties and Disability Qualifications, lodged by James A. Mackey on behalf of the 1673 Network. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to increase the number of professionals, such as speech and language therapists, educational psychologists, physiotherapists, psychiatrists and occupational therapists, qualified to assess children and parents with learning disabilities and difficulties and other behavioural problems to reduce the number of children taken into care. As our note for this petition outlines, the clerks have requested Scottish Government's views on this petition on a number of occasions, but this information has not been forthcoming. I would want to make the general point that because of COVID, we have been going to Scottish Government for the views at the initial stage when we're considering the petition at the first stage, and that has proved to be very, very helpful, because it's given us a very early insight into thinking the Scottish Government, and has perhaps reduced the amount of time between starting a petition and getting views on it, and that's been really productive. So it's disappointing that we've not had a response to this one, but we do appreciate that education particularly may be under a lot of pressure at the moment. I can see the general case in this petition. I think there's a lot of the kinds of services and support services around young people and around the assessing of needs. We know that a lot of people practicing the autism community talk about getting a late diagnosis, and educational psychologists, unless you speak to teachers like educational psychologists and so on, there are fewer of them available, and I'm never quite clear whether some of that is policy and some of it is also just the scale of the financial challenges for our local authorities. So I think we would want to get further thinking from the Scottish Government through the Minister on the issues that are flagged up in the petition. But I'm going to call members, and I'll call David Torrance first.
Thank you, Convener. I think every one of us as an MSP has had concerns raised about assessment of children in our mailbox. So I'll quite happily like to write to the Minister for Children and Young People to seek their views on the action called for in the petition. I'd also like to write to trade unions to see what their views are on it as well. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, can I suggest that perhaps we write, in the first instance, would it be to the STUC, or are you seeing us, because there's such a range of different professions there, I wonder if it would be to write through the STUC and ask them to seek information, or do you think there are specific unions that we should be writing to directly? I
think I agree with you. We just write to STUC and get a general view of theirs first.
Okay, thank you. Tom Mason?
We certainly need quite a bit of information in order to take this one forward in various ways. And certainly to the government, and certainly some representatives of the professional bodies to see. I don't think we necessarily need information from all of the professional bodies, but some lead ones to get some guidance as to where we're going with this, to make sure we got the framework right, and we can fill in the gaps next time around.
Okay, would it be acceptable to leave to the clerks to think about who the appropriate bodies might be then?
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Gail Ross?
Thank you, Convener. I mean, yes, I can understand why we haven't had a response from the Scottish Government, although the responses in advance have certainly been extremely helpful. In our deliberations, it's quite a detailed subject, so I agree. I think that we should write to the Minister, and also happy to write to any other relevant organisation as suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Corrie?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I agree with all that's been said. Again, in writing to the Minister for Children, and also, as you said, the SQAC. But I sit on the cross-party group for dyslexia and have a lot of work and time spent in dealing with learning support needs at first hand. So I would certainly support that happening, and also to the trade unions as well, because it's something that is coming up now in this COVID emergency, and the support. I had a case from a constituent the other day whose child was a bit worried in further education. He couldn't get the support from lecturers because they're now online, so the fact of going one-to-one was important, and he wasn't able to complete some of his work. So I fully support that we need to keep this open and to see what we can do to get this sorted. Thank you.
Okay, with it, I think there's a consensus then that we're agreeing there is some work to be done on this, and we'll write to the Minister for Children and Young People to seek views in the action called for in the petition, and we'll ask clerks to look at the best way of identifying both trade union and professional views on the petition. With that, we can move on to the next petition. The second new petition for consideration today is petition 1810, replace the European Union flag with the Commonwealth flag, lodged by Philip Smith. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to fly the Commonwealth flag in place of the European Union flag at Scottish Government buildings. In its written submission, the Scottish Government explains that the decision to continue flying the European flag from the main Scottish Government buildings was made to send an unequivocal signal of the commitment to the values that underpin the EU and our solidarity with EU nationals resident in Scotland. And in terms of my views, I'm content that the Commonwealth flag is flown once a year. I think the Commonwealth is an important body with an important role to play. And I suppose on the European flag, I would simply make the observation that the Scottish Parliament has taken a view in this in the very recent past about the decision to fly the European flag. I'll call Tom Mason first.
In this particular instance, I think it's one of trying to get consistency. I mean, technically, I guess, flying the Union flag now represents, in due course, the Council of Europe, as opposed to the European Union. If you're flying that one, then you should be flying the Commonwealth flag and a NATO one and a whole load of other ones. So it would be my view that putting up the Commonwealth flag is inconsistent, but I would take the European Union flag down on a continuous basis. But I don't think we can make any progress because the Scottish Government is very adamant about what he wants to do, so I don't think we'll get any changes. So closing it in response to what the government has said, I think is what we have to do.
Thank you. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I think that the submission that we had from the government has made it quite clear that the policy is in place. I would say that I would disagree with Tom Mason. I don't think that it's the Scottish Government that's adamant. It was a decision that the Parliament made, and that is in place. So under 15.7 of standing orders, I would close this petition.
Great, thank you. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Convener. And just to correct Gail Ross on the point just now, yes, that the Parliament decision was taken for the flags at the Scottish Parliament building. The ones on Scottish Government buildings itself in Scotland are obviously already taken at a government level. So I think there are two distinct differences there, just to clarify that. This is an issue that rages through councils. I've been through it many times. The policy is clear for the Scottish Government. They set a policy, and as indeed have the Scottish Parliament. Agree or disagree with it. I agree with you, Convener, that it's important that we have the Commonwealth flag flying as it is on the Commonwealth Day, and Armed Forces fly on Armed Forces Day, and the Red Ensign flies on Merchant Navy Day. So as long as we can keep that going, that's fine. It will always be contentious issues, and I've seen it over the years I can remember. So I would vote to close the petition under 15.7. It's clear the Scottish Government has no plans to replace any changes to the flag waving, the flag policy, flying policy, and therefore I would support that.
Thank you. David Torrance.
I'm quite happy to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders, Convener, and I have nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you. I think there is a consensus that regardless of people's individual views on the flying of individual flags at any particular time, the Scottish Government has made it very clear that there are no plans to do this, and that Scottish Parliament in the very recent past have taken a view on this as well. And so I think we're therefore agreeing to close the petition. I think, like others, we would emphasise the importance of the appropriate flags being flown at an appropriate time, including the Commonwealth flag itself. And I would want to thank the petitioner for engaging with the Public Petitions Committee and for highlighting the issues as they did. And of course, they have the opportunity to return in a year's time on the same issue if they felt that was appropriate. If we can now finally move on to the last new petition for consideration today, which is Petition 1812, Protect Scotland's Remaining Ancient, Native and Semi-Native Woodlands and Woodland Floors, lodged by Audrey Baird and Fiona Baker on behalf of Help Trees Help Us. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to deliver world-leading legislation giving Scotland's remaining fragments of ancient native and semi-native woodlands and woodland floors full legal protection before COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties in Glasgow in November 2021. And I would want to welcome Jackie Bailey, who's in attendance for this petition. Scottish Government's response describes the possible protections available for woodlands, whilst acknowledging that there is no specific legislation that protects ancient woodlands. Petitioners have submitted a written submission that was received after our papers were circulated. The clerks have therefore sent this information to us separately. The submission highlights the various threats to Scottish woodlands, such as that tree preservation orders are onerous and offer little protection, and that other legislation is outdated. It also states that the Scottish Government has not addressed the specific issues in the petition, including the lack of protection for woodlands and private ownership that have no statutory designation or formal protection, unlike the measures for commercial forestry mentioned by the Scottish Government. And I should add that since our meeting papers were published, we have received a late submission from the Woodland Trust in Scotland, which has been circulated to members. And I wonder, in order to facilitate our discussion of the petition, if I could maybe ask Jackie Bailey to make a contribution initially. I will allow you to come back in again later, of course, Jackie, but you may want to have initial comments on the petition itself.
Thank you very much, Convener, and I won't test your and the committee's patience by wanting to come in too often, but let me thank you for the time this morning. Let me make a couple of fundamental points about the petition, because I think it's important. Ancient and native woodland that currently has no statutory designation, that is also in private ownership, has no effective legal protection at all. And despite the government's codes, guidelines, strategies, plans, documents, what is happening is we have a confusing landscape that doesn't actually provide protection. So this petition is about urging the government to grasp the opportunity to show clear leadership on a world stage by fully protecting our ancient woodlands before hosting the COP26 next year. Now, secondly, the value of ancient and native woodland floors is completely unrecognised, and outdated legislation is not offering the protection that we would all want to see. Thirdly, Scotland only has 1% of ancient woodland left, 3% of native and semi-native woodland, and the Woodland Trust has registered 274 ancient woods in Scotland that are currently threatened by development. So whether that's illegal felling or development that falls through the cracks, the reality is our national woodland resources are being eaten away. Ancient woodlands are irreplaceable, so fines are actually too little, too late. It doesn't save the woodland. Less than half of Scotland's woodlands are in good condition. That's often in part down to landowners with problems of poor management, neglect, over or undergrazing, invasive species. The list is endless. So really we need to do something. And the National Planning Framework 4 includes 6 high-level outcomes. Granting full legal protection to our ancient and native woodlands would meet 3 of these. And the petitioners aspire, as I think we all do, to a future Scotland that respects and protects precious life-giving trees. So thank you, Convener, for your time, and I hope that the committee will take action before it's too late.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jackie. It did feel to me that there was something quite significant here about the direct experience of the petitioners that raised concerns. I don't in any way pretend to be an expert, but you would be worrying that these very precious historical resources would be lost to modern development that was simply being unthinking. But I'll call Gail Ross first.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, this is one of these petitions that you read it and then you get the response from the Scottish Government, and with all the lists that they give you of protections and biodiversity strategies, forestry strategies, sites of special scientific interest, and if we just left it there, I probably would have thought there are plenty of protections in place. But given the petitioner's response to that, the response from the Woodland Trust, and also the evidence that Jackie Bailey has just given us, I do believe that there are not enough protections in place for these very important ancient woodlands that are probably being cut down without our knowledge, unfortunately. And I think Jackie Baillie is absolutely right. And that was something that struck me as well, was about fines. It's too late by then to punish people. You need protections in place to stop it happening in the first place. So I would agree that something has to be done. Forest floors were mentioned as well. And it also struck me about, as you said, Convener, the petitioner's own personal experience about what happened in that woodland that they cite. And there were no planning restrictions that were the planning that they had to seek was not there, and they were allowed to just go ahead and make that bike track without any comeback at all. So I think that we do need to pursue this. I think we should write to Nature Scot, which was previously SNH, seek their views. I would also, after what Jackie Baillie said about National Planning Framework 4, want to follow that up and to see if there are any strategic development planning authorities that we could write to, seek their views for the actions called in the petition. And I would also like to thank the petitioners for their interest in this very important matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to say thank you to Jackie Baillie for interesting comments and input to this case and this petition, and also thank the two ladies, Audrey Baird and Fiona Baker, who I know are residents in my region and know well. Yeah, it's a very interesting petition and something that we need to preserve. And I'm certainly mindful of the minded to write to Nature Scot, as Gil Ross was saying, and to the various strategic planning authorities to call with action. But I think a very interesting point that Jackie Baillie made was this question about where the legislation lies with the privately owned lands. And I would want to write to the Scottish land owners and estate owners as well, the association that covers that, because I think we need to get that sorted out as well. So we don't want to take that off the radar. And I absolutely appreciate that point that Jackie made, because there is a lot of that around. Yeah, I think it's an important thing. We need to, as I say, write to COSLA maybe for some information on the COSLA level of planning and protection of our ancient woodlands. So I support that we carry out those procedures, but certainly not close petition.
Okay, thank you very much. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. It's not often I agree with Jackie Baillie, but in this instance I agree with everything that she says. And can I just back up what the committee members have said about who we need to write to try and protect these ancient woodlands. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Tom Mason.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, Jackie Baillie said really just what I wanted to say, which she's much more articulate than I am on the subject. This to me is a very important area to get right. I mean, it's been prompted by an experience with the cycle track, but that's just has prompted the issue, and we need to take it much wider than that to include the whole process of ancient forests and woodlands in the context of a total strategy for the countryside. And because the planting and the extension of tree planting generally is important, and there are some initiatives going to do that part, but it corresponds with keeping the ancient ones there as well. So collecting information together from Natural Scotland and getting into the planning framework is vitally important. And I think if we keep this open for the moment and get that information in, to see if we can get a direction sorted out to prompt the various authorities, as it were, to get the process going, so we do get the woodlands and tree planting and generally are kept in the framework, in the planning framework. So there is a positive outcome for everybody, because it's very important not only for the countryside itself, but maintaining it for the cities to enjoy the countryside as well. And the ancient forests are part of that process. So keeping it open, collecting the information, and progressing forward is where we should be. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. I'm slightly troubled by Jackie Bailey, the consensus builder here, but I think we can, it's first time for everything, I guess. I think we're generally saying that we want to write to Nature Scotland, we want to write strategic development planning authorities, we'd want to write Scottish Land and Estates. I'm not sure if we need to write to COSLA if we're going to be writing to the planning authorities, but if people feel very strongly about that, then maybe come back. I'm just a wee bit concerned that we're simply sending off correspondence that won't get an effective return. But I'm going to bring in Jackie Bailey just before we come to a final view. Jackie?
Thank you very much, Convener, and I will always try and build consensus, but can I thank the committee for their positive comments and support for the petition, because it is the case that once we lose our ancient woodlands, that is it. So anything we can do to protect them, I know will be appreciated, not just by the petitioners, but by people who value ancient woodlands across Scotland. So thank you very much for the committee's time.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we are agreeing, and I'm seeing from the chat box that people are content with this, that we do write to Nature Scot, that we write to strategic planning authorities, we write to Scottish Land and Estates, but at this stage I think we're agreeing that it's not necessary to write to COSLA, but we do recognise there's an important issue here. Thank Jackie Bailey for her time and thank the petitioners for the work that they've done to bring the petition with such a compelling argument to the attention of the committee. With that, can I thank Broadcasting for the support again today. We managed to get through this without too many glitches, to the clerks and to the members who've made my job relatively straightforward for once. And with that, can I thank everyone, and I'll close the meeting.